I went back and listened to Aaron Glenn's press conference and to Darren Mougey's press conference. And then I went back and listened to an interview that Aaron Glenn did one-on-one with SNY following the press conference. And I come away with some thoughts on the Jets wide receiver room, because it's interesting that both Darren Mougey and Aaron Glenn, in separate interviews, in separate press conferences, both of them downplayed the idea that the Jets need another wide receiver. And as we sit here right now, I think if you're a rational fan, you know that cannot be the case. The New York Jets wide receiver room is lacking a proven commodity next to Garrett Wilson. It just is. I like A.D. Mitchell as much as anyone. A.D. Mitchell had what? 24 catches in 8 games with the Jets after he was acquired. He flashed some potential. I think that they might have something in Isaiah Williams in some sort of role, but right now he's the number 3, right? Garrett Wilson's Garrett Wilson, but you already paid Garrett Wilson. So how do you maximize what he is as a player? Well, you need to add another playmaker who can go out there and take some of the attention away from Garrett. Or if teams are going to double Garrett and shade all their coverage towards him, you need someone else that can make you pay for that. So listen to what both Mougey and Glenn said about the wide receiver room. I am hoping that this is a giant smokescreen, right? They don't want to telegraph the fact that they need a wide receiver. Mougey, we know, is a shrewd trader. He doesn't want to telegraph the fact that he's in negotiations potentially with a different team to land a veteran wide receiver. Maybe it's Brian Thomas Jr., right? That's what I hope is happening here. But we said this last year, and guess what? No, they went into the year woefully unprepared in that room, right? Remember the whole talk there, Garrett Wilson injury away from being in trouble? Well, guess what? That is exactly what happened. Now, it wouldn't have mattered because Justin Fields can't complete a pass, to quote the owner of the team. But the point is, they were woefully short in that room, and right now it's the same thing. They're not that much better than they were a year ago when they had Tyler Johnson and Allen Lazard and Josh Reynolds trying to masquerade as like the number 2 wide receiver for Garrett Wilson. It wasn't good enough then, and right now their room is still not good enough, even if Mason Taylor takes a leap in year 2 like Aaron Glenn said he expects him to. He's still a tight end, and they still need more weapons. So this was Darren Mougey being asked about the wide receiver room the other day.
Good about the wide receiver room. Obviously, getting Garrett back and healthy will be big for us, and seeing A.D. Mitchell and Isaiah and Arian, having those guys take the next step and continue to grow. But like all positions, we'll continue to evaluate the markets and see, is there an opportunity to add, competition and depth.
I mean, Arian Smith cannot be a factor on this team. He can't. He's got to earn a roster spot. This feels like Malachi Corley all over again. If you're asking me right now, does Arian Smith make the Jets roster? I'd say it's 50-50. I'd lean with no, if I had to guess. Because I don't buy this. I think this is a smokescreen. I think the New York Jets are going to add a bona fide wide receiver because I believe that they're being competently run by Mougey, and he's going to recognize the mistakes he made last year, and he's going to look at this draft, and there's a reason why the Jets haven't spent big money at that position in free agency, because they think, based on their scouting, they could find a really good receiver either at 16 or at pick 33. That, to me, is what's happening here. They're going to add a wide receiver. They have no choice. It could be a trade as well, as I mentioned. This was Glenn being asked the same question.
That you are happy with your wide receiver room currently, but how comfortable are you adding a receiver in the draft, or do you want some more veteran depth at that position?
We're comfortable with adding good players, whatever position that is. I mean, obviously, Garrett's a number 1. I'm really looking forward to see what A.D. Mitchell do this year. Obviously, he's going to be a part of this program from off-season into training camp, which will help him. Then you have Isaiah. Man, we have a number of guys. We have Arian, who was our draft pick last year. We have a number of guys that's going to get a chance to take that next step with us. So I look forward to seeing that.
I mean, look, Glenn can say whatever he wants about Arian. He had 7 catches last year. A.D. Mitchell flashed some potential. They need weapons, man. Do you want to have this fairy tale Geno Smith season, right? The head coach said yesterday that Geno's going to lead them to the promised land. Well, you got to surround Geno Smith with weapons. And I find it interesting that we're all asking for Geno Smith to give us the Ryan Fitzpatrick 2015 season. The dirty little secret about why Fitzpatrick was able to have that magical year is because look who he was throwing to. Brandon Marshall, who had the greatest single season a Jet wide receiver has ever had. Broke basically every record that year. Eric Decker, who's a 1 at that point in time on a lot of teams in the league. He was the Jets' number 2. And their number 3 was Quincy Enunwa, who's a really good player before injuries, unfortunately, ravaged his career. Not to mention they had a running back in Chris Ivory that ran for over 1,000 yards. That helped Fitzpatrick. So, like, you got to add more playmakers, man. They have the ingredients of being a pretty good offense, as crazy as that sounds. Right? If Frank Reich is not completely washed as a play caller, there's enough in that offense to think they shouldn't be an embarrassment. And I get it. A lot of Jet fans are going to hear that and be like, who cares? But this team couldn't complete passes last year. Can they at least be watchable? Like, they lost week 1 to the Steelers. That was a fun game, at least offensively, right? It was a watchable game from that standpoint. Can we get more games like that? Scoring points? Offensively, they have Breece Hall, who will be back. I'm very confident in that after hearing from both Glenn and Mougey the past couple of days. You combine that with an offensive line that on paper looks like it should be the strength of the offense. It was last year. They had a good season. Now, they had a lot of great injury luck outside of AVT. But you know what? They're in position with both the stud tackles, another year of Membu, another year of Olu, Tippmann, contract year. Maybe the Jets get something done with him, but he's a really good player. I think Dylan Parham was a low-key, underrated type of deal by Mougey. I'm a fan of that signing. Myers, if he's your 5th best lineman, you could live with that, and they could draft someone. Wouldn't shock me if pick 33 or 44 is used on an offensive lineman. In fact, I wouldn't be upset if they took, let's say, Emmanuel Pregnant from Oregon in the 2nd round. So our guy, Omari Brown, who joins us in his weekly spot. Omari, how we feeling? The draft is officially later this month. What's going on?
Feels good. Feels good, man. It feels like, I saw a joke the other day. Somebody said I would surrender a day 3 pick just so the draft could start last week. So I think that we're, listen, between Ben Gate, between everything that's been going on, the pro day circuit, we're definitely in the dog days of this draft cycle. And I know I speak for myself and a ton of Jets fans that we just wanted to get here. We're tired of talking about ankle flexion and shins being parallel to the floor and bend and twitch. I'm twitched out, Jake. I don't know about you.
Yeah, I think that's well said. 22 days, 9 hours, 44 minutes, 50 seconds. But hey, who's counting? Jets on the clock at 2-16 in the first round, and we'll certainly get into the draft. But first time I've had you on since Aaron Glenn held his league meeting presser. And the quote that is generating the most buzz, memes, laughs is this.
I just feel like he's the guy that's going to lead us to the promised land.
So it's interesting. 38 minutes, Glenn, way more relaxed with reporters. Clearly, he wasn't going to come in and be contentious following just a 3-win season, but he really kind of let his personality show a lot more than we've seen him in the past. We'll get to the Geno quote, and that, of course, is gaining the most attention. But what stood out to you? What did you make overall of anything Aaron Glenn had to say yesterday?
Yeah, I would say his overall demeanor. He seemed very calm. He seemed very calculated. Well, Jake, you and I, when we first met in person, it was another Aaron Glenn, cliff note and meme worthy statement. So this time I thought that he was calculated. I thought his demeanor was calm. He actually let his personality show through a little bit. And I think he understands. He hears the noise. Those guys try to act like they don't, but they know what's going on. And we're in a buzzsaw in this media market. So I thought he did a good job. A lot of it is going to be coach speak. And we'll get into what Darren Mougey said as well, too. And that's GM speak. And we all know that this is smokescreen season. But if we're going to be critical about how he was last year, I thought he was kind of the way we all wished he would have came in, quietly confident. You're going to underpromise and overdeliver. He did give us a quote, and we'll get into that a little bit later. But listen, man, we're just going to be objective about this. I don't think that it was anything crazy. I actually appreciated the time that he gave to the beat.
Yeah, I mean, look, there were some things he said that I think clear coach speak. There were some things he said that you could actually maybe gain some valuable insight into the Jets thinking. The Geno Smith, though, quote, right? I just feel like he's the guy who's going to lead us to the promised land. I just wish he didn't say it because, well, at the end of the day, doesn't matter what he says on the last day in March, big picture. No, but it just follows a similar pattern of Aaron Glenn saying unnecessary things that will come back and bite the Jets in the you-know-what. Like, you hear Aaron Glenn say that, and people just laugh. Like, Geno might be like, oh, I appreciate Coach having my back, but I don't even know if deep down Geno Smith wants to hear Aaron Glenn say, I'm going to lead the Jets to the promised land, because I just feel like it puts unnecessary pressure on Glenn, on Geno in particular in this case. Like, Glenn had the superhero comments that you and I were there for at the Combine in the month of February, and then here we are in the month of March, and he's just generating another headline with comments that just feel unnecessary. Like, he just always goes a little too far. Like, if he had just simply said, Geno Smith, we believe, is going to be a really good quarterback for us. We look at what happened last year and think that is not we think that's an outlier on who he is, or we're really excited of what type of offense we could be with Geno. We think we got a guy who could give us some competent quarterback play going forward. Like, there's just so many other ways he could have said it than to just take it a step too far, saying, oh, he's going to lead us to the promised land. I mean, then you just naturally set up the Jets to be memed to death. It's the headline on ESPN.com. It's the headline and a talking point on all the shows. It's just be boring, man. Like, you don't need to say anything. This is the guy who said that he wanted the Jets to move in silence. He said that a year ago at the same press conference at the owners' meetings, and everything since that point, they have done the opposite of moving in silence, and that's my big issue with it. I just feel like this was an unnecessary misstep that is going to be used against the Jets the second Geno Smith has a bad game or the Jets are in this rut and they start losing football games.
I mean, actually, you could just see it now. The promised land, getting sacked in the Daily Post and the New York Post is, posting it with his face. I mean, it's so I kind of find myself stuck in between, because on the one hand, I want him to be authentically himself. And if he wants to say that, and if he wants to use coach speak and be that high energy guy that has, unwavering belief in his players, I want him to be that. But then on the other side, like how I would operate, I can't force somebody else to operate. So if he is genuinely being himself, Jake, and he's confident in his players and he wants to instill that faith in his players, then by all means do that. And if we're going to talk, Jake, listen, Geno Smith delivered the Raiders to the first overall pick. He didn't exactly specify what the promised land is. It could be 1-1 of 27. So he didn't specifically say what that promised land is.
Right.
So if you want to get into that, we could get into that.
I just wish someone on the beat, and I'll ask Rich about this, how come no one followed up and said, well, what's the promised land? Is the promised land winning more than 7 games for the first time in over a decade since Geno Smith was last on the Jets in 2015, if you think about it through that perspective? I mean, what is the promised land? Winning season, making the playoffs? It's certainly not the Super Bowl, because Aaron Glenn can't be delusional enough to think that 36-year-old Geno Smith, coming off a season where he quarterbacked the worst team in the NFL, is going to be leading the Jets to the promised land. Like, there's just no way this coach is that delusional. Is he, Omari? What is the promised land?
Listen, blind faith. All right. He's blind faith right now. So I'm going to say the promised land is going to be competent football, because I think that's what, our ceiling is for what their ceiling is for this season. I think that it's I think and this is pre-draft, I think their ceiling is probably going to be maybe, a 4-win increase. So I'm not really sure what the promised land is. And that's a great question to ask Rich, because that's what I would have followed up. I would have said, hey, coach, what is your idea of the promised land for this year? What I really took away from that, Jake? It seems like we're going into year 1, which is unfortunate because we had to endure such a historically bad season of 3-14. The way Glenn is talking, he talked about having some of the adults and how the team sorely lacked that. He talked about some of the players that are coming in. I think that there's so many questions going into year 2 that it's a little disheartening, because we should be building off of the building blocks and the foundations of year 1. And it seems like this is, last year was 0, and now we're going into year 1 to where we're just now getting Glenn's players in. We're just now getting his type of guys in the building, and now we're just now going to be able to run his system. So I just think that it's a little unfortunate, but the way that he spoke, and I believe it was Costello, I don't want to misspeak, but they asked about, do you feel any added pressure? I think that he already feels pressure. And I think that in this league, they're all in privileged positions, and pressure is a privilege. It's a privilege to go out there and coach the New York Jets and to coach all these great football players. It's a privilege to, have that pressure of an entire fan base and to break a 15-year drought. So I think that they're already feeling the pressure. I think that's just in him. So if that's just in him, I want him to be the same way when they're losing and the same way when hopefully they start winning. So I just think that there's I'm just kind of in between right now. And I think where most fans are, we just really need to see it on the field. All of this is good. We're tired of the of the bulletin board material. We're tired of the memes. We just want to see some good football now.
100%. It just feels like an unnecessary misstep. And again, at the end of the day, if this was just a one-off, it wouldn't matter. But like, you just don't see good coaches say things like this. Like John Harbaugh didn't come out and say, I believe Jackson Dart's the guy that could get us to the promised land. But if he did say that, we wouldn't laugh at that. You know, it'd be believable. It'd be like, yeah, of course. When you say that about Geno Smith, like, I don't know, just you just add more fuel to the Jets are the laughing stock fire. And if you win, nobody cares. But he was brash and had this cocky attitude all in year one and got his teeth kicked in and was so dead wrong about Justin Fields. We still bring up the quotes that he said about how he's never been coached properly. We're going to let him play quarterback. And Justin Fields wasn't just bad. He was historically bad. And no matter how anyone feels about Fields, he had never played as poor as he did with the Jets since his rookie year with the Bears. So that was a real coaching problem. And this was a coach who had a lot to do with Fields being his handpicked quarterback in the first place. I just think this was a silly misstep. And it's a shame because I would have hoped that Aaron Glenn, after the play calling is my superpower moment and falling asleep at the combine and just once again being in the headlines for all the wrong reasons in this offseason, would have learned from that, because there was some good things yesterday. But the issue is this is all anyone is talking about. This is the big story. And it's a shame because it's just yet another moment where, like, LOL Jets. And if you're a Jet fan, you just got to hear it from all your non-Jet fan friends who make fun of you or send you memes about this, quote from the head coach who should know better at this point.
And you know what, Jake, I'll piggyback on that. I think that it is unfortunate because just like you alluded to, like they've done some really good things over this offseason. I thought the leaks have pretty much, you did touch on something. You said you want them to move in silence. I think they've done a good job of mitigating all the leaks. There really aren't any more leaks coming out of One Jets Drive. So, and they've done a lot of good things. And I truly do like the way that they operate, especially the way AG and especially the way Mougey answers questions. I just, they've done so many good things. And I think that every time we try to take a step away from the LOL Jets, there's something like this that kind of pulls us right back. So I'm just looking for the time where we can keep taking positive steps and getting away from the circus act a little bit. And I think that he still has a lot to learn, and I think that he's basically the face of $1 billion entity. We all know that Woody Johnson is the owner, but as the head coach, you are the face of $1 billion enterprise. So I just think that he just has to be a little bit more calculated. But then again, he's a football guy and he gets excited. So sometimes I kind of get stuck in between, but I am always of the ilk of under promise, over deliver. And I hope that, Am Glenn can still be himself, but that a little bit.
And that's what I think you hope. Eventually it gets to a place where he could do that. But this to me is just who he is. And the other thing that really stood out, before we get to some of the newsworthy things, there was a question by a reporter who covers the Lions that wanted Glenn's perspective on how, if you're a contending team and you basically get the brain drain over the course of the offseason where other teams raid your coaching staff, guys go away and become head coaches, just how challenging is that? And it was ironic because Glenn said, well, in a way, it's a good problem to have because it means you're a pretty good team if you're losing all your coaches. And the irony is Aaron Glenn fired a historic amount of his coaches after a year, not because the Jets were so good they were getting poached away by other teams. No, he fired them because they were horrible and they won 3 games. So I just thought that was a really ironic moment that I don't know how many people caught in this press conference, being asked about the Lions having the brain drain of losing all their assistant coaches because of the success they've had. And meanwhile, the Jets have had this brain drain by choice because the guys they hired didn't have brains in the first place.
Yeah, I thought that was really interesting. They basically had I don't even know if you could call it the brain drain for the total opposite reason. So the Jets are not victims of their own success right now. They're victims of their own mediocrity. So that's why they've had to really usher in this new thing. But what I did like is that he talks about having more synergy with the coaches in place now. And then one cool thing that I've always brought up as well, too, is like, I want the Jets to not only have a funnel of talent, but maybe let's do a better job of developing coaches a little bit. So now that you have Frank Reich, I believe he mentioned Seth Ryan specifically, which I thought was pretty cool. Seth Ryan is going to be an up and coming guy. So now you have the elder statement, which is going to be Glenn and Frank Reich, but then you have the young understudies. So you kind of have a marriage of two. with Brian Duke on the defensive side and Seth Ryan on the offensive side. So I'm actually looking forward to, I think that that's a relationship that we're going to have to pay attention to as a storyline throughout the season. How is Frank Reich going to modernize his offense a little bit, and what role specifically is Seth Ryan going to play on offense? Because the cool thing I did see is that Glenn is, now that he's going to be more involved on game day, he's going to need more help, and he's going to have to delegate a little bit more. So he's installing the defense right now, but when it's time to go in there and work with the offense, Brian Duker is going to take over, and he's familiar with that offense as well too. So I'm actually excited, Jake, to see what is going to happen in terms of development from a player standpoint and development from a coaching standpoint. And again, all these things we're talking about, I feel like that should have been done year one, but I do like the direction that they're going in. And just because I like the direction that they're going in doesn't mean that I've fully bought back into him and this coaching staff as the right people to take us to the aforementioned promised land.
So sticking with the Glenn conversation, you mentioned Seth Ryan. I hit on that while you were gone. I thought another thing that was notable was the Mason Taylor conversation. He was asked for a player who he thought could take a big leap from year one to year two. He cited Mason Taylor. Does that go into your thinking at all in the Sadiq conversation at 16? I know they could be used differently, or they could be used at the same time, but just your thoughts, one, on what he said about Taylor and how that maybe impacts the draft decisions.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that, and we've talked about this, we're team offensive weapons, and we're not going to discriminate. And I think that Kenyon Sadiq and Mason Taylor offer, different things. I think you could move Sadiq a little bit more than you can. Mason's more of that inline tight end. Sadiq could be that movable piece. You could put him at H-back to create a mismatch out in the backfield. You could line him up, and he could be your big slot to kind of create some mismatches as well too. So I think that they both could be useful for Frank Reich in 12 personnel. So that's one running back, two tight ends. So that didn't shock me at all. And I know that they're high on Mason Taylor as well too. They want high character guys. Mason Taylor's still a young guy. The worst thing about Mason Taylor is, Jake, that we still exactly don't know what he is. Can he be more of a stretch the seam, more of a put pressure on the defense type of guy, or is he going to be more of that Jason Witten, safety blanket underneath and not really give you much run after the catch, but just be that safety blanket, which is important as well too. And that's what I'm talking about when I say that we still have year one questions going into year two. And a lot of these guys that we weren't able to fully get grades on, like an AD Mitchell, like a Mason Taylor, hell, even Breece Hall. I think that there's still some. I think this is year 5, and we're going into Breece Hall. We still have a ton of questions. We're still waiting for that 80 reception year with Breece Hall, and hopefully this is the year that we still get that. But again, Mason Taylor, I know that he's one of Glenn's guys. Again, NFL pedigree on both sides. Hall of Fame uncle, Hall of Fame father. He's a young player. He went to he's SEC battle tested, and he's a high floor, high character guy. So I think that they're going to be high on Mason Taylor. And I know that this is smokescreen season. They got to stop talking up the wide receiver room. It's Garrett, and then there's a bunch of question marks. And I know that they're not trying to give their hands away, but Jake, I don't have any hair, and it's because the Jets have helped that as well too. That's the reason I don't have any hair. So I'm pulling out my beard. We all know that wide receiver 2 is is a big weakness on this team, and even the biggest AD Mitchell fan out there would tell you, and even AD Mitchell himself too, when he was on the Downs podcast, he would say that he has a lot to prove as well too.
Hey, here's the deal. Just got no chance unless you click on that like button, and you got to make sure you subscribe to the Jake Asman Show. You don't, you can get the fuck out. Now let's go, Asmaniacs. We're built for this shit.